Hello there, folks. Welcome to Broadband Deployment News. At an NTCA conference this week, Commerce Secretary Raimondo is encouraging small internet service providers to apply for BEAD funding. Be right back with more. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. You see here a story in Fierce Telecom. Commerce Secretary urges small ISPs to apply for BEAD. And this is important because a lot of internet service providers that are smaller don't have a lot of resources to be able to, a lot of times, put in applications for funding, especially when you're talking about government rules and regulations. And that's one thing that might keep them away. And the Secretary Raimondo is trying to make a case here that they should be applying for that. So I want to take a quick look at this and make some comments. So again, here you see U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is urging small broadband providers to apply for BEAD grants, despite some in the industry having concerns over whether the program provides a level playing field. And it's not just that. It is an issue because you've got larger providers that would be going in for funds. And again, they have lots more resources. But it's also, a lot of times, even if the small provider, if they knew they could get the money, a lot of times they don't want to do it because even if they weren't competing, they realize just how many hoops there are that you have to jump through and all of the things that you've got to do. And sometimes they wonder, should I take these funds or should I just go ahead? Would it be less expensive for me to just go ahead and do it on my own without taking the funds? Because the funding can be very expensive to take when you look at certain things. So I think there's a couple of factors going on there. Speaking at the RTIME 2024 conference, that's the Rural Telecom Industry Meeting and Expo. That's something that NTCA holds once a year. And a little history on NTCA. So they're currently called, I think it's NTCA. We'll see it here in a minute. I think it's the Rural Broadband Organization, something like that. So the letters don't really mean anything anymore, I guess, because they don't say what the letters are. But NTCA actually started out sometime around 1950 or so as a group, as a committee under the NRECA, which is the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. So that was for rural electric co-ops. And there were a few co-ops that were doing both electricity and telephone. So it started out that way. And then not long after, 4 or 5 years later, they kind of split off into their own group as NTCA, which was the National Telephone Cooperative Association. So it was a association of cooperatives, kind of you've got a rural electric co-op or an EMC. You have rural telephone co-ops that are in a sense owned by the people that they serve, if you look at it that way. So that's kind of how they got started. And then I remember back when I got in this business, there was NTCA, and then there was another organization called OPASCO, which was the Organization for the Protection, Advancement of Small Telephone Companies, OPASCO. So that was a whole other group of small telephone companies that were not co-ops, that tended to be rural telephone companies that were owned by, a lot of times, family-owned. You had the family, some that started the business, and it continued on, and it's a private independent telephone company. Those are still around as well. And then back at some point, I forget when it was, NTCA rolled OPASCO. They kind of merged together, and everybody rolled under the NTCA umbrella. And then fairly recently, I guess, they changed from NTCA, meaning rural, telephone companies, telephone co-ops, to just NTCA broadband providers. So they don't use the letters now for what that means. So they call themselves a Rural Broadband Association. So she was speaking at this RTIME conference, and she addressed small rural providers who this would be. Again, these telephone cooperatives, independent telephone companies that are providing all kinds of services, primarily telephone, but also, obviously, that's how they got started, but also, now everybody broadband and some video as well. So she said, "We want you to apply. We need you to apply. We will work with you and hold your hand so that you can apply. The message is prepare to compete and win. You can win," she said. In a discussion with Raimondo, Shirley Bloomfield, the CEO of the NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association, expressed concerns about bureaucratic hurdles facing rural companies applying for BEAD grants. She said, "I'm concerned that the number of NTCA members might look at this program and say it's too administrative, it's too burdensome, there are too many rules, there are too many hoops to jump through," Bloomfield said. In response, Raimondo emphasized the importance of small provider participation. With 90% of the unserved U.S. population living in rural areas, bigger providers aren't necessarily interested in serving those areas. And that's true. So that's why you need local ISPs. So if you're a local internet service provider, you really need to be looking into this. And again, the Commerce Department wants to work with you. So definitely check it out. Now, again, where does this stand? The states currently are going through a challenge process where they're kind of deduplicating the data, making sure that they understand where all of the areas are that should have broadband, those that do have broadband, don't have broadband, and all of that is going through a challenge process and making sure that any funds that have already been committed but maybe not deployed yet, that those are not included, because we want to make sure that we're not duplicating funding in certain areas. We want to make sure that if an area gets funded, it's just funded once and not twice. So that's where that is right now. So they're still doing that, and they still would certainly be entertaining inquiries from internet service providers in their area that are interested in bidding in certain areas. So you definitely need to be involved. Keeping BEAD simple. While maintaining standards to protect taxpayers, Raimondo said the NTIA is committed to reducing bureaucracy and red tape to make applying for BEAD simple. Particularly for smaller providers that lack resources like lawyers, lobbyists, and compliance teams, streamlining the process will help them deal with the labyrinth of NTIA's applications. That said, the administration is communicating with governors' offices in order to provide a single point of contact for broadband providers in applying in each state. And each state does have a person that they can speak to at NTIA about BEAD, and obviously they've been doing that this whole time. And it sounds like here maybe that would also be a contact for the broadband providers in the state that want to apply, so to be able to get as much assistance as they can to be able to get through this labyrinth of details in the application. Additionally, the NTIA is ready to hear feedback on BEAD's rules and application process. It's a pitch and catch between providers and us, said Raimondo. For example, after pushback against the BEAD program's letter of credit requirement for BEAD, NTIA applied changes to the rule, offering waivers and accommodations. And that was a big concern for folks, because if you get a letter of credit, then you have to basically put aside the amount of money that it's going to cost you to build this broadband network, and it's sitting there doing nothing. So you can't, for a small provider, they don't have the kind of money to be able to put that aside and then also be able to have the money to be able to actually deploy the service. So again, they are offering waivers and accommodations for that. And if companies see any other parts of the program as too bureaucratic or burdensome, she added, let us know and we'll find solutions. Mentions here supply chain concerns. That was certainly a concern as we came out of the pandemic, where equipment was hard to get, fiber was hard to get. A lot of that's loosened up now. The supply chain is another concern for small providers, Bloomfield noted. When BEAD money starts to hit the market in late 2024 and 2025, fiber providers and other technology or infrastructure resources could be overrun by anybody and everybody, she said, leading companies to hoard supplies as many did during the COVID-era supply chain pileup. And that's a concern. In fact, right now, I think, a lot of equipment vendors are seeing less demand right now, because a lot of folks are waiting to see what's going to happen. And once the BEAD funding comes out, there's going to be, like it says here, a rush for folks needing to be able to order what they need to get the fiber in the ground. In most cases, it'll be fiber. So you're talking about the equipment, the fiber itself, all of those things are going to be in high demand. But the NTIA has seen some of these supply issues in the past, Raimondo said, adding, we're going to do whatever we can to not let that happen now. Specifically, she highlighted that the Build in America initiative is being taken seriously by the administration. And that is one of the things that people were concerned about, is that as you were going to get equipment, a certain fairly high percentage of what was in that equipment had to be manufactured in the United States. And there's a lot of stuff that was not, or still is not. But the NTIA has been working with vendors to try to get them to start making more stuff here in the United States. It says here the Build America, Buy America Act, or BABA, places regulations on the sourcing and manufacturing materials used in government-funded projects like BEAD, requiring that materials be both manufactured and sourced predominantly from within the U.S. The NTIA has had to navigate through the BABA provision amid concerns it could cause significant delays in actual deployments. In response to those fears, it issued a proposed waiver to some of the Buy American rules for BEAD recipients. I reported on that in the past. According to Del Oro analyst Jeff Hayman, BABA requirements are already starting to impact the market for PON equipment as more vendors interested in being part of projects have announced domestic manufacturing relationships. For example, Nokia last year announced it would team with longtime manufacturing partner Sanmina, excuse me. I reported on that as well. Couldn't remember the name. To bring production of fiber network electronics to the U.S. state of Wisconsin. Both CommScope and Corning announced expanded manufacturing plans as well. So this is important as, stuff that was ordinarily manufactured overseas. They're trying to move some of that now onshore so that it will qualify for this Build America, Buy America program. And that's good for us, obviously. And it's good for jobs. It's good for trade, reducing the trade deficit. So these are all good things. Workforce woes. As the U.S. faces historically low unemployment rates, a nationwide labor shortage means that small providers in rural areas are also facing an especially limited talent pool for building and operating networks. So you think about that. Think about when a lot of this BEAD money starts hitting at the same time in a state, for example. So state's going to start saying which subgrantees are going to get money and where. So you've got the concern that contractors and others are going to be moving around where they see the first opportunities. And they're going to move, and then suddenly, how are you going to find talent in your area? And they're maybe going to go to locations, maybe some bigger operators if they wanted to do that. So those are concerns. And again, it's something the small operators need to be thinking about in their area because they are going to have less resources, less access maybe to a contractor kind of portfolio that they call on, that bigger operators would call on quite often to do these jobs. So it's going to be a little bit harder. So again, I'm not trying to discourage small operators from getting in. What I'm saying, you need to be considering that as you think about applying for BEAD funding and trying to line up all of those resources. It's a real challenge, Raimondo said, but it's such an exciting opportunity. Despite being branded as a broadband infrastructure investment, she called BEAD a jobs program too. And really, that's what it came out of, right? It was the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So it is infrastructure, it's broadband infrastructure, and it is jobs. And it is jobs. A lot of times when there's funding from the government and they say shovel-ready jobs, they're not shovel-ready. And, I guess you have to say in this case, it's not shovel-ready. It could be shovel-ready. The problem is that it takes so long it's been taking so long to get through this process. We had the broadband mapping that needed to be done. And that was important, right? We wanted to make sure that if we're going to be spending all of this money, that we're not spending it in areas that have broadband, and so we needed to know where every single location was in the United States that should have broadband, and do they have broadband? That was the first step, and there was a long process in that. It took a little bit longer because there was a lawsuit, another company that felt they should have gotten the bid to build the FCC map, had challenged CostQuest, who actually did that, in that selection, and that took some time, but that was resolved. But again, all of this led to delays, but overall, other than that, things have been moving about as quickly as you could expect, considering everything that has to take place. Again, we've got this challenge process. That's important because, again, we need to make sure that as we lay out the areas that we think should be getting broadband, that interested parties can go in and look at that and make sure that it's correct. So these are all things that are going to take time. So they are shovel-ready jobs, which we can get through all of this stuff. So they are jobs that should be ready to go. And then, again, that is what's driving the concern that will we have enough people and will we have enough supplies and material to be able to pull this off? Let's see here. So she says the NTIA estimates that BEAD will create at least 150,000 jobs laying fiber and connecting homes. And these will be fairly good paying jobs. Many of those won't require college degrees, so the administration has a huge workforce development. That's important to note too. So if you're out there now and you're listening and you're like, what am I going to do next with my career, or how am I going to make some money soon? Well, this is one way, is to get trained up in this, because you will have plenty of opportunity to go find jobs in your local area. Most likely, you won't have to move. You could move anywhere you want, and probably continue to move as these different projects are around. But you'll have an opportunity to get trained in an area that's needed, and if you succeed, obviously, and do well, then you could turn that easily into a permanent position. If you're one of those that are kind of outstanding at doing that for a company, they'll want to keep you on, because there'll always be opportunities for additional expansion as we get new neighborhoods and maintenance, those kinds of things. And so anyway, broadband's a great business to be in, so don't forget that. Let's see, for example, its Million Women in Construction initiative, started in 2022, aims to bring more women in the broadband construction industry. And you can't see them. There's some links in here. I've just highlighted in some areas that I'm reading here. But I linked to this article in the description below if you want to check some of this stuff out. Noting that some broadband construction positions can pay up to $70 an hour is not bad. Raimondo said NTIA will continue placing an emphasis on jobs, job training, and finding people who might be in lower wage jobs who want something better and are willing to get trained. So again, that's a great opportunity if you are someone who's looking to maybe change what you're doing today, looking for other opportunities. They are coming, and they're going to be coming fairly quickly. So you want to get trained up and be ready when those positions open up. So again, if you're a small internet service provider, there's an opportunity for you to get broadband funding. The NTIA is willing to work with you on that. So just reach out to your state. I'll go ahead, I didn't put it in here, but I'll go ahead and put a link to where you can find the NTIA's list of who your person would be at the NTIA for this program. So it's a map. You just click on your state, then you can find out who you can contact about that. I didn't do that, but I'll go ahead and link to that after this broadcast so that if you are an internet service provider, you'll be able to find that. So again, if you're a individual, go ahead and get trained up for a new career because there'll be plenty of opportunities for that. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. If you are not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button and ring the bell and you'll be notified when I'm live. If this was helpful or you like this video, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. See you next time. Bye-bye.